There's something happening in the Florida Everglades right now that most people have no idea about. And yeah, it involves robot bunnies. I know that sounds completely insane, but here's the truth. More than 100,000 Burmese pythons are loose in Florida. They're eating everything: deer, alligators, even people's pets, and nothing humans have tried so far has worked. So the scientists decided to try something different, something desperate, something that sounds like it was ripped straight out of a sci-fi movie. They built robotic rabbits, stuffed them with sensors, and released them into the swamps as bait. But here's what nobody expected. What happened next wasn't just smart. It was terrifying. And by the end of this video, you'll see why this might be the most brilliant or the most dangerous idea humans have ever come up with. The Florida Everglades used to sound like a symphony. You'd hear raccoons rustling through the palm bushes, opossums squeaking at night, bobcats slipping through the swamps, and rabbits moving around trees. But if you go there now, it's different. It's quiet. Too quiet. In the early 2000s, scientists started seeing fewer and fewer mammals during their nighttime surveys. At first, they thought maybe the animals had just moved to different areas. But then, the survey data came in, and it was catastrophic. Between 2003 and 2011, raccoon populations dropped by 99.3%. Opossums, down 98.9%. Bobcats, 87.5% gone. And rabbits, both marsh and cottontails, have all gone down in numbers completely. As if someone had hit the delete button on an entire species. Something was eating the Everglades alive from the inside out. That something was the Burmese python. The Burmese python is an invasive species that has taken over the Florida Everglades, and it's wiping out almost every animal that lives there. Now, let me be clear about what an invasive species actually means, because this is about an animal being in the wrong place. An invasive species is like introducing a professional boxer into a kindergarten playground. The local animals never evolved to deal with this threat. As a matter of fact, they don't recognize it as dangerous. They have no defenses, no escape strategies. Burmese pythons are native to Southeast Asia, where they belong in a balanced ecosystem with predators and prey that understand each other. But in Florida, they're like ghosts. They move in absolutely silent and camouflaged, capable of going months without eating, then swallowing a full-grown deer whole when the opportunity strikes. And here's the scary part. Nobody really knows how many of these snakes are out there. Conservative estimates say tens of thousands, but some scientists think it could be hundreds of thousands, all crawling through more than 1,000 square miles of Florida's swamps, wetlands, and forests. How did they end up in the Florida Everglades? Well, they most likely got there because of the pet trade. Back then, people could easily buy Burmese pythons as pets. They were sold in pet stores and online, and nobody thought it was a problem. But once the snakes grew too big to handle, people started letting them go in the Everglades. They thought releasing them into the wild was the kind thing to do, but that one mistake turned into a massive problem for all the local animals. Maybe some escaped during Hurricane Andrew in 1992, when a snake breeding facility was destroyed. However they got here, they found paradise. Warm weather year-round, unlimited food, no natural predators. And they did what any successful species does. They multiplied. By the time scientists realized what was happening, it was already too late. The pythons had established breeding populations. They were spreading, and they were eating everything. Hunters were deployed, thousands of them. The state even created the Python Challenge, a competition where people could win prizes for catching the biggest snakes. In 1 year, trained hunters removed over 600 pythons. Sounds impressive, right? Except that barely made a significant deduction. Here's the problem with hunting pythons. They're almost impossible to find. Their detection rate is estimated at only 1 to 3%. That means if there are 100 pythons in an area, you're likely to spot just 1 or 2 if you're lucky. They're masters of camouflage, mostly active at night, and they can stay perfectly still for hours. It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack, except the haystack is the size of Rhode Island, and the needle can kill you. Scientists tried everything. They used tracking dogs trained to sniff out pythons. They attached radio transmitters to male Judas snakes that would lead them to breeding females. They even tried something called environmental DNA testing, basically collecting water samples to see if any tiny traces of python DNA were floating in it. Some methods worked better than others, but nothing was fast enough or effective enough to stop the invasion. And then, someone had an absolutely insane idea. What if we built robot rabbits? Dr. Robert McCleary sat in his office at the University of Florida, staring at a problem that seemed impossible to solve. He'd been studying the Everglades ecosystem for over a decade, now watching it collapse in slow motion. And he was tired of just documenting the disaster. You get tired of documenting the problem? You want to address it, he told reporters. The challenge was simple, but brutal. How do you catch an animal that's nearly invisible in terrain that's almost impossible to navigate when traditional hunting methods barely work? McCleary knew that pythons hunt by sensing heat and detecting movement. They're ambush predators that wait for prey to come to them. So the question became, what if we could lure them out instead of searching for them? The team had actually tried using live rabbits in cages as bait before, and it worked surprisingly well. Over 90 days, 9 rabbit pens attracted 22 pythons. The snakes would stay near the cages for over an hour on average, drawn by the heat signature and smell of potential prey. But there was an obvious problem with this approach. The rabbits didn't fare well, as McCleary diplomatically put it. Using live animals as bait raised serious ethical concerns. Plus, it was expensive, required constant care, and the rabbits were understandably stressed about being python bait. So McCleary and his team started thinking, what if we could create something that looked, smelled, and felt like a rabbit to a python, but wasn't actually alive? The thing is, pythons don't see the world the way we do. Like I mentioned earlier, they hunt using special heat-sensing pits on their faces that can pick up even the tiniest temperature change, just a fraction of a degree. They also use smell and vibration to find their prey. The idea sounded like science fiction, but McCleary wasn't working alone. He partnered with engineers, wildlife biologists, and technology specialists. Together, they started designing what would become one of the strangest wildlife management tools ever created. Mike Kirkland, a senior invasive animal biologist at South Florida's Water Management District, saw the potential right away. Speaking to reporters, he said, "It's projects like this that we can use in important natural areas. It helps us lure the pythons out of hiding and bring them to us." He added, "It could be a bit of a game changer." The South Florida Water Management District agreed to pay for the project through their Python Elimination Program, a plan created to reduce the number of invasive pythons in the area. The University of Florida joined in to provide the research side of things, using their scientists and equipment to make sure the project was done properly. And slowly, almost impossibly, the robot rabbits came to life. 40 of them were built and ready to be deployed into one of the most hostile environments in North America. The team knew it sounded insane. McCleary himself admitted, "These things may sound a little crazy." But crazy was exactly what this situation needed. Let me break down how these machines actually work, step by step, because this is where the genius really shows. They started with stuffed toy rabbits, the kind you'd buy for a child. It was chosen specifically because it has the right size and shape. A real marsh rabbit weighs about 2 to 3 pounds and measures roughly 12 to 16 inches long. The robot matches these dimensions almost perfectly. The fur texture is soft and realistic enough that even if a python wraps around it, the physical feedback won't immediately scream fake. Inside that fuzzy exterior is where things get interesting. The heating system is the heart of the whole setup. Tiny, battery-powered heaters are placed throughout the body to create warmth, the same kind of heat a real animal gives off. These heaters are carefully adjusted to keep the surface temperature between 95 and 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The exact warmth of python's heat sensors would pick up from a real rabbit. But heat alone isn't enough. Real rabbits move, they twitch, shift their weight, and breathe. So the engineers added tiny motors inside the body to create small, natural movements. The rabbit can shake a little, mimicking the nervous energy of a real animal. It can also turn its head slowly, like it's looking around for danger. These movements happen at random times, so they feel natural and less mechanical. They also powered it all with solar panels, because changing batteries in the middle of the Everglades is nobody's idea of a good time. The solar panels are cleverly integrated into the design, hidden from view, but positioned to catch maximum sunlight. This is crucial because these robots need to operate for days or even weeks at a time in remote locations. The solar charging system means they can run indefinitely without human intervention. Now here's where Phase 2 gets even more advanced. The team is working on adding scent dispensers, small containers that release certain smells every few seconds. These aren't just random scents. They're specific pheromones and natural chemicals that real rabbits naturally produce. To a python's super-sensitive sense of smell, this completes the illusion. Heat, movement, and scent all working together to say, "This is food." But the real innovation is the surveillance system. Each robot contains a small motion-activated camera positioned to capture anything that approaches. When a python strikes or begins to coil around the robot, the camera starts recording. This gives scientists unprecedented footage of python hunting behavior, how they approach, how they strike, how long they investigate potential prey. The robots also have GPS trackers and motion sensors. If a python drags the robot away, which has happened, scientists can locate it immediately. If the robot is damaged or moved, an alert is sent to the monitoring team. And here's the part that makes this a trap rather than just an observation tool. Once a python is detected attacking a robot, the location is flagged. A response team, trained python wranglers, can be dispatched to the site. The python, having just eaten, will likely stay in the area, making it much easier to locate and capture. Think of it like this. Instead of searching 1,000 square miles for a nearly invisible snake, you're creating a situation where the snake comes to you and then tells you exactly where it is. And the whole system is built specifically to target pythons only. Other local hunters like bobcats or birds of prey might notice the robot, but they hunt in a completely different way. They rely more on what they see and how an animal acts. A motionless rabbit that smells slightly off won't trigger their hunting instinct the same way it does for a python. It's kind of clever, in a weird way, using the python's own instincts against it, taking what makes it such a perfect hunter and turning that into its weakness. The deployment began quietly, without fanfare or press releases. As McCleary told reporters, "I don't want people hunting down my robo-bunnies." But thankfully, we know some details. As you already know, 40 robots were strategically placed throughout South Florida's wetlands, focusing on areas where python populations are known to be high. These aren't random locations. They're chosen based on years of data about python movement patterns, breeding sites, and hunting grounds. Some robots were placed near known python dens. Others were positioned along travel corridors, the routes pythons use to move between hunting grounds. A few were placed in areas where native mammal populations had been completely wiped out, creating what scientists call ecological traps, places where pythons still hunt but find nothing. Each robot's location was logged with GPS coordinates. Each one was assigned an identification number, and each one began transmitting data back to a central monitoring station. Scientists can check the status of any robot remotely. They can see if it's functioning properly, if the battery is charged, if the camera has been triggered. If a robot stops moving or its signal disappears, they know something has happened. The team set up a monitoring schedule, daily checks of the data feeds, weekly physical inspections of select robots, monthly comprehensive reviews of all collected footage and sensor data. Some robots were placed in pairs to test whether multiple heat signatures would be more attractive. Others were isolated to see if lone targets were more likely to be attacked. A few were positioned near water sources, where pythons are known to ambush prey coming to drink. The size of the project was something no one had ever tried before. No one had ever used robotic animals to manage a predator problem on this kind of scale. Sure, hunters have used decoys for ducks and deer, but those are just simple fake models. No electronics, no moving parts. These robots were way more advanced. They could move, sense, and operate on their own in one of the toughest environments on the planet. And slowly, the data started coming in. The first python attack happened on day 12 of the operation. The camera footage shows exactly what the scientists hoped to see: a large python, estimated at over 10 feet long, approaching the robot slowly. The snake's tongue flicks in and out, tasting the air. It circles the robot once, twice. Then it strikes. The attack happens in an instant. 1 second, the python is completely still. The next, its jaws snap shut around the robot's middle. Right after that, its body coils up, wrapping tightly around the fake rabbit with incredible strength. The camera keeps recording. You can see the python's muscles contracting, squeezing tighter and tighter. This goes on for several minutes. The python is trying to suffocate its prey, waiting for the heartbeat to stop and for the breathing to cease. But of course, there is no heartbeat, no breathing, just motors and heaters and cameras. Eventually, the python seems to realize something is wrong. It doesn't release immediately. Pythons are very patient, but after about 20 minutes, it begins to uncoil. The snake investigates the robot more carefully, tongue flicking constantly. Then it simply leaves. The robot, slightly crushed, but still functional, continued recording. This pattern repeated across multiple sites. The robots were attracting pythons at a rate of about 1 per week, matching the success rate of the earlier live rabbit experiments. But now, no animals were being harmed, and scientists were getting detailed behavioral data they'd never had access to before. Some of the footage is genuinely fascinating. One video shows a python approaching a robot, then stopping suddenly when an alligator surfaces nearby. The python retreats. The alligator investigates the robot briefly, then loses interest. Two apex predators, both fooled momentarily by a stuffed toy with a heating element. But not everything went according to plan. 3 robots were completely destroyed, not by pythons but by wild boars. Apparently, feral pigs are curious and destructive, and they tore apart several robots before the team could retrieve them. The footage shows pigs rooting around the robots, biting them, tossing them in the air. One pig seemed particularly offended by the robot's existence and stomped on it repeatedly. That wasn't all. 2 of the robots just stopped working. The harsh environment had simply worn them down. Water found its way into their electronics, even though they were supposed to be waterproof, and debris from trees ended up covering their solar panels, blocking out the sunlight they needed to recharge. In the end, those damaged robots had to be collected and sent back for repairs and upgrades. One robot disappeared entirely. Its GPS signal vanished. The team searched the area, but never found it. The leading theory is that a python dragged it into deep water, where it sank and the signal was blocked. Or possibly someone found it and took it home, which would make for one weird conversation. "Honey, why is there a robot rabbit in our garage?" But here's where the data gets really interesting. The cameras captured not just python attacks, but python behavior in general. Scientists observed pythons investigating the robots without attacking, approaching, circling, testing with their tongues, then moving on. This suggests that while the heat signature was convincing, something about the smell or the movement pattern wasn't quite right. This information is actually really valuable. It shows the team exactly what needs to be fixed or improved for the next version of the robots. Maybe the movement needs to look a bit more random. Maybe the scent dispensers are more important than they first thought. Or maybe the robots just need to be placed in better spots. The project also revealed something unexpected. Pythons become more active during certain phases of the moon. The data showed that they interacted with the robot more often during new moons, when the nights are the darkest. This kind of information is extremely valuable for wildlife experts because it helps them plan the best times to hunt and track the snakes. As of the latest reports, the robots have successfully detected and helped capture several pythons. The exact numbers haven't been released yet. Study is ongoing, and full results will be available in November, according to McCleary. But preliminary data suggests the system works. Not perfectly, not without problems, but it works. And in the world of controlling invasive animals, where success is usually measured in tiny percentages, hearing the words, "it works," is a huge win. Let's talk about what could go wrong, because no technology is without consequences, especially when you're introducing artificial animals into a real ecosystem. The first concern is obvious. What happens when native predators attack the robots? Bobcats, for instance, are already struggling in the Everglades thanks to python predation. If a hungry bobcat uses up its energy attacking a robot rabbit, that's energy it loses. Energy that could have gone into hunting real prey. In the wild, every bit of energy matters, and sometimes that small difference can decide whether an animal survives or starves. The same thing applies to hunting birds like hawks and eagles. They might swoop down and attack the robot, not realizing it's fake, and end up hurting themselves on the hard plastic and metal parts. Out in the wild, an injury like a broken claw or a damaged beak can be deadly. A bird that can't hunt can't survive. The research team insists they've designed the robots to be python-specific, but nature doesn't always cooperate with human intentions. Animals are curious. They investigate new things. And in an ecosystem that's already under tremendous stress, adding artificial elements, even with good intentions, carries risks. Then there's the question of dependency. What if pythons start to connect the robots with danger? Pythons are smart reptiles, and if enough of them attack these fake rabbits and end up getting caught, they might start avoiding rabbits altogether. That sounds like a good thing at first, right? But here's the problem. If pythons stop hunting rabbits, they'll just move on to other animals, and that could put even more pressure on species that are already struggling to survive. There's also the issue of technology breaking down. These robots aren't built to last forever. As we saw earlier, they can stop working or malfunction at any time. And when that happens, they basically turn into high-tech trash, plastic and electronic parts scattered across a protected wilderness. The team does have plans to collect and fix them, but in a swamp that stretches over 1,000 square miles, some are bound to get lost. Some environmental groups have started to worry about what this could lead to. If robot animals become a regular tool for managing wildlife, where do we draw the line? Would we start making robot deer to lure in wolves? Or robot fish to trap invasive species in rivers? We're using robot animals to fix nature, but how far can we go before it stops helping and starts making things worse? And there's an even deeper question here. Are we actually fixing the problem or just creating new ones? The robot rabbits might help catch pythons, but they don't address why the pythons are there in the first place. They don't stop people from releasing pet snakes into the wild. They don't prevent the next invasive species from establishing itself. They're a band-aid on a wound that needs stitches. Dr. Andrew Durso, a reptile expert at Florida Gulf Coast University, explained that even the best python removal programs are still struggling to keep up with how fast these snakes reproduce. There's strong evidence that the scout snake program is the most effective and reliable method we have, he said. He was talking about the male pythons fitted with radio trackers we mentioned earlier. If you can take out one female, he added, you're not just removing a single snake, you're stopping all the babies she would have produced. That's thousands of eggs that will never be laid. The robot rabbits are a clever idea, but they're not a perfect solution. They're just one tool in a much bigger fight, a fight we might already be losing. And then there's the cost. Each robot costs around $5,000 when you include everything, building it, sending it into the field, and tracking how it performs. That's not cheap. Money like that could also be used for other conservation work, things like restoring habitats, running breeding programs for endangered animals, or teaching people how to prevent future invasions. Is this really the best way to spend limited conservation money? That's a question with no simple answer, but maybe the biggest risk is the one that's hardest to see, the risk of overconfidence. It's the idea that we can invent our way out of the environmental problems we caused ourselves, that technology will always save us, that nature is something we can control and fix if we just build the right gadgets. But history tells a different story. Every time humans have tried to control nature with technology, it's led to unexpected results, sometimes small, sometimes disastrous. The robot rabbits might end up working exactly as planned, or they might cause problems we haven't even thought of yet. But here's what gives some scientists hope. At least we're trying something new. At least we're acknowledging that traditional methods aren't enough. At least we're willing to experiment, to innovate, to think creatively about solutions. Mike Kirkland explained it like this. As with most environmental problems, the best approach is to use several different methods that all work together. The robot bunnies aren't supposed to be the only answer. They're just one tool in a much bigger plan that also includes human hunters, tracking dogs, Judas snakes, public education, and constant research. Each method has its own strengths and weaknesses. Each one also raises its own moral questions. But together, the robot bunnies represent humanity's best effort to fix a mistake we made decades ago. The question isn't whether the robot bunnies are perfect. They're not. The question is whether they're better than the alternatives. And right now, the answer seems to be yes. Here's where this story gets really interesting, because the robot bunnies aren't just about Florida's python problem. They're a proof of concept for something much bigger. Invasive species are a global crisis. They're the second leading cause of species extinction worldwide, right behind habitat loss. And they're getting worse. Climate change is letting invasive animals and plants move into new places, spots that used to be too cold or too hot for them to survive. Global trade is also moving living things around by accident, carrying them across oceans in ships, planes, or shipping containers. And once an invasive species gets settled in a new area, removing it becomes almost impossible. Right now, there are invasive species causing problems on every continent except Antarctica. Cane toads in Australia, lionfish in the Caribbean, Asian carp in North American rivers. Burmese pythons are just one part of that much bigger problem. And here's the thing. The usual ways of controlling invasive animals just aren't working fast enough. Hunting and trapping take a lot of time, effort, and money. Using chemicals can hurt the animals and plants that actually belong there. And bringing in new predators or diseases to fight invaders can easily go wrong. Sometimes those new species become a whole new problem themselves. But robotic decoys? That's something completely new. Picture robot fish that lure invasive carp straight into nets. Robot birds that attract invasive starlings away from the nests of native birds. Even tiny robot insects that mess with invasive beetles and stop them from spreading. The technology already exists. The real question is whether it can be made big enough and flexible enough to work for different species and environments. The Florida Robot Bunny Project is being watched closely by wildlife managers around the world. If it succeeds, if it proves that robotic decoys can be a cost-effective, ethical, and practical tool for invasive species management, it could revolutionize conservation biology. Some researchers are already thinking bigger. What if the robots didn't just attract invasive species, but actively captured them? Imagine a robot rabbit that, when attacked by a python, deploys a net or a cage, or releases a tranquilizer, or simply locks onto the snake with mechanical jaws, holding it in place until human responders arrive. Again, I know it all sounds like science fiction, but the technology already exists. It's just a matter of engineering and funding. There's also potential for these robots to serve multiple purposes. They could monitor ecosystem health, collecting data on temperature, humidity, water quality, and animal movements. They could serve as early warning systems for new invasive species. They could even be used for education. Imagine live streaming cameras showing real-time wildlife interactions to classrooms around the world. But the future of this technology also depends on something harder to measure: what people think about it. Right now, the robot rabbits are just a strange but interesting experiment, something that grabs attention and makes headlines. But what happens if they become a normal tool? If we start seeing robot animals being used in protected natural areas, will people be okay with that? Or will there be backlash? People pushing back against the idea of turning nature into something mechanical? There's also the question of whether this idea can work on a larger scale. Right now, 40 robot rabbits in the Everglades is just a small test program. But there are tens of thousands of pythons spread out across thousands of square miles. To actually make a real difference in their population, you'd need hundreds, maybe even thousands, of robots running nonstop for years, maybe even decades. That's a huge logistical and financial challenge. It would need steady funding, regular maintenance, constant tech updates, and coordinated work between several different agencies and groups. Is that realistic? Maybe. Maybe not. But there's a darker possibility we can't ignore. What if the tech gets too good? What if we create robots so convincing they could lure and trap almost any animal? The same tools that save native wildlife from invasive pythons could be turned the other way, used to poach endangered animals. Robot bait could lead tigers into traps. Robot mates could lure rare birds into capture. The technology itself is neutral. It's a tool. But like any tool, it can be used for good or evil, and there's no guarantee it will only be used by people with good intentions. There's also the question of what this means for the future of the wild. If we start filling natural places with robotic animals, can we still call them wild? And if every ecosystem needs constant human help and technology to survive, have we changed what nature really means? Some scientists are hopeful. They see robotic wildlife management as a necessary adjustment to a world humans have already changed in huge ways. Their view is simple. We damaged these ecosystems, so it's our responsibility to fix them, using any tools we have. Others are more cautious. They worry about unintended consequences, about creating dependencies on technology, about losing the wildness that makes nature valuable in the first place. But here's what everyone agrees on. We can't go back to the way things were. The Everglades will never be the same as they were before the pythons arrived. Too much has changed. Too many animals have been lost. The ecosystem has been fundamentally restructured. The best we can hope for is to prevent further collapse, to stabilize the situation, to give native species a fighting chance to recover. And if robot bunnies can help with that, then maybe they're worth the risks and complications. McCleary and his team are already thinking about improvements for the next generation. Better waterproofing, more realistic movement patterns, enhanced scent dispensers, longer battery life, improved cameras. Each iteration will be more convincing, more durable, more effective. They're also exploring whether the technology could be adapted for other invasive species in Florida. The state has problems with invasive iguanas, tegu lizards, and even more species of invasive snakes. Could robot prey help manage those populations too? As previously mentioned, the full data from the current study won't be ready until later this year. But the early results look good enough that more funding has already been approved to keep the research going. The South Florida Water Management District is still fully behind the project. The University of Florida is expanding its program to study invasive species even further, and other states are watching closely, curious to see if they can use the same kind of technology to tackle their own invasive species problems. Mike Kirkland has a clear picture of what success would look like. In the future, he said, I see the python population dropping to a level where our native animals can start making a real comeback. And that's the whole reason we're doing this. I'm confident we'll get to a point where species like deer, foxes, possums, raccoons, and others return to the Everglades in healthy numbers. It's an ambitious goal, maybe even an impossible one, but it's a goal worth fighting for. In a strange way, the robot bunnies represent something hopeful. They're evidence that humans can be creative and innovative when trying to solve the problems we've created. They show that we're willing to try unconventional solutions, to think outside the box, to use our technological capabilities for conservation rather than just exploitation. But they're also a reminder of how complicated we've made the natural world. We've created situations so messed up that we need to build fake animals to try to fix them. That's not something to be proud of. It's something to learn from. The future of the Robot Bunny project, and projects like it, will depend on whether we can use technology wisely, whether we can balance innovation with ethics, whether we can solve problems without creating new ones, and whether we can finally learn to prevent these disasters in the first place, so we don't need robot animals at all. So, is it genius or madness? Maybe it's both. It has to be both. The robot bunnies sitting out there in the Florida swamps right now, completely still, giving off heat and waiting, show the best and worst sides of human nature. We have damaged something precious, and now we're using every bit of creativity and technology we have to fix it, even if what we're doing feels strange or a little ridiculous. There's something strangely human about building fake rabbits to catch real snakes. It's smart, a little crazy, and kind of sad all at the same time. It shows how we're always trying to outsmart nature, while also admitting we still don't completely understand it. The pythons don't know they're part of an experiment. They don't know they're invasive. They're just being pythons, doing what millions of years of evolution programmed them to do. And the robot bunnies don't know they're heroes or harbingers or anything at all. They're just machines following their programming. But somewhere in between, in the swamps and the labs and the monitoring stations, there are humans trying to make things right, trying to save an ecosystem, trying to prove that innovation and nature can coexist. Whether they succeed or fail, the robot bunnies will be remembered as one of the strangest, most ambitious conservation experiments ever attempted. And maybe that's exactly what this moment in history requires. Not safe solutions, not conventional thinking, but bold, weird, slightly mad ideas that just might work. Because in a world where we've already changed everything, maybe the only way forward is to get creative, even if that means building an army of fake rabbits and sending them into battle against an army of real snakes. Welcome to the future of conservation. It's weirder than you thought.